Brian Milkey here, Union Township, Isabella County, State of Michigan.
Martin Fig here, Union Township, Isabella County.
Dave Coyne here, Union Township, Isabella County.
Cheryl Hunter here, Union Township, Isabella County.
Jeff Sweet, Union Township, Isabella County.
Robert Bacon, Union Township, Isabella County.
Savjit Chaudhry, Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
Rick Byers, Union Township, Isabella County.
Tom Keequam, Union Township, Isabella County. Moving on to item 3, approval of the agenda. And I think we have a small an amendment to it. Your 8A you mentioned, Rodney?
Yes, I apologize, but unfortunately, I completely dropped the ball on making sure the election of officers was included on the agenda. So we need to add an item 8A, election of chair and vice chair.
Move to approve the agenda with the addition of item 8A, election of officers.
Support.
A motion by Brian Melky and support by
Coyne.
Artie Fig.
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. And the agenda is approved. Thank you. Going on to agenda item number 4, approval of the meeting minutes of the April 20th regular meeting. How are those looking to everybody?
Looks good. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda, approve the minutes from the April 20th, 2021 meeting.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Fig, supported by Mr. Sweet to approve the April 20th, 2021 meeting minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. And the meeting minutes are approved. Going on to item 5, presentations. We have the fiscal year 2020 audit presentation.
All right, I guess I'll take that as my cue to get started. Would you like me to share screen and bring up the presentation? I don't know if I have rights to do that or not.
You do have that, and please do.
Okay. I'll give it my best go. All right, I think you should be able to see it. All right, well, thank you for having me on your meeting. I'll try to keep it short and sweet and give you the relevant information that you need to know. We did present last week to the Township's Board of Trustees, so they have received their presentation, and now we'll go through just some EDA specific information for you. So we did issue an unmodified opinion. This is the highest level of assurance that we can give you. And we're saying basically that the financial records and statements that are presented within the audited report are fairly and appropriately presented, and that they are done so in accordance with accounting principles that are generally accepted in the United States. And that is going to include the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control that we see as relevant to preparing those financial statements. And we believe that they're free from material misstatement, whether that be due to fraud or to error. So that's really the clean opinion that you want us to be issuing on those financial statements. Taking a look at the East EDA first, you can see here the 5-year trend in revenues. for East EDA have basically been hovering around that $500,000 threshold here for the past few years. This year was up just ever so slightly from 2019 due to increase in property tax revenues that come in. So the majority of those revenues, what you see there in red, are going to be property tax related dollars. On the expenditure side, then you can see that the expenditures kind of move up and down depending on the year, and really dependent on the projects that you approve to have those funds expended on. So you'll see 2020 was a little bit lighter of a year. You only spent about $200,000 in 2020. That was a decrease from the previous year. In 2019, there were some additional road projects where dollars were spent. So that's why 2019 was up slightly. But we generally, depending on the makeup of a DDA and the type of activities that you're funding, we kind of expect these expenditures to move up and down. A lot of times the DDAs will be saving up for some projects and then do a larger project in 1 year and then maybe scale back for a couple years and just work on some smaller items. So not surprising to us to see the expenditure level vary from year to year here.
Holly, can I ask you a question about the expenditures going back? In the East DDA, it shows close to 100,000 a couple times. Is the majority of that from investment, return on investment? For other income, the blue portion of the revenues?
Yes, some of that is going to be related to investment income. Not all of it. Sherry, do you happen to remember what else is recorded within there in that other category? I thought she was on, but maybe not.
I am. I'm right here. Part of it would be the amount, the fire fund. Let me think. Part of it would be the amount that the East DDA receives for lost personal property taxes from the state of Michigan. We file a report every year in June. When the legislations changed that we couldn't collect as many personal property taxes at the local level, it's now collected at the state level, and then we file a report and we get back some money from the state to try to make us whole on the lost personal property taxes. So that's part of it. And the other part is interest income. And I would say those are probably the two largest items that make up that other.
And I think those reimbursements from the state make up the majority of the blue. I think investment income was maybe like a fifth of that amount there.
That's about, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, here we can see for the past 5 years when revenues have exceeded or fell below the total expenses incurred. You'll see for 2019 and then again here in 2020, revenues did exceed expenses. So that meant for 2020, there was an increase in your net position amount of $311,000. So in a period of adding back to net position versus using up some of those funds. Then on the West DDA side, here again, we can see the revenues for the past 5 years. You'll see 2020 versus 2019 is fairly consistent. Property taxes were up slightly for that year, but consistent year over year. On the expenditure side then, again, we see some fluctuation over the 5 years of when expenditures were occurring. Again, in 2019, in this fund, there were also additional road projects and some sewer related projects that were funded. So that's why those expenses in the previous year were more than in 2020. So I think we've seen a lot of DDAs during 2020, just given the pandemic. Overall spending was down oftentimes just because it was harder to get projects done, and people had to kind of put off doing some of those projects. So only about 137,000 in West DDA expenditures. And then a similar story for 2020 for the West DDA. This was a year in which revenues exceeded expenses. And so approximately $200,000 was added back to your net position for this fiscal year. Then we can see the ending net position for both the East and the West. So East is there on the left-hand side. You'll see that has been trending up for the past several years. So in total, there's approximately 1.76 million in net position for East DDA at the end of 2020. And then the West DDA, also that bar has been moving up. You had a year, 2017, when you used some fund balance or net position, but at the end of 2020, there was about 1.23 million in total net position. So some balances there to be able to use on future projects as you see fit. And then taking a step back from the numbers, just want to report on any finding type matters. We did not issue any written findings to the township this year. So nothing came to our attention that would qualify as some type of a material weakness or a significant deficiency. So internal controls, even despite the pandemic, looked solid. We didn't identify any major concerns that we had. Obviously, sometimes people are getting things done a little bit differently, but there was good documentation and still very sound internal controls at the township. So we did not have any concerns when it came to this area as well. Really, Sherry does a great job of making sure internal controls are in place. She's always been one to ask about processes if something's going to change. Is it okay to do this? Could we do something different? So we feel really comfortable with that. And just overall, Sherry and the people that she has to coordinate with did a great job of being prepared for this audit. And we really appreciate everything that they do to make sure this can get done. And I would take any other questions if you have any.
No questions?
Looks good. Thank you, Ally.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Ally. And I want to say thank you to Sherry and Rodney and the staff of the township for pulling off another excellent year. And let's let the record show the audit, fiscal year 2020 audit was received and filed. Thank you. So we want to move on to item 6, public comment.
Currently, we do not have any members of the public with us.
Let's move on to 7, reports. 7A, accounts payable.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll start off with the accounts payable for the East DDA. We had a payment to Consumers Energy for $658.33. And we had a payment to MMI for $460. This is for the grounds maintenance along Pickard where the park benches are. And that was for April. And then we also have a payment for $152.50 to the Michigan Economic Developers Association. That's 1/2 of the MEDA membership dues for 2021. And then we also have a payment for $19,714.91 to the Union Township General Fund. That's a contribution that you all approved a couple of months ago to help out with the Phase 1 upgrades for the Jamison Park, basically Jamison Hall. And so we have a total for accounts payable for the East EDA of $20,985.74. Are there any questions on those?
I'll just make a comment real quickly. I had a chance a couple weeks ago to see the upgrades to Jamison Hall. Money well spent. Looks fabulous.
Nice to hear. Can I get a motion to approve the 20,000?
I move the motion to.
Support. Did you have to read that?
We got a motion by Mr. Chowdhury to approve the East EDA accounts payable checks date from April 21st through May 18th in the amount of $20,985.74. Motion by Mr. Chowdhury, support by Mr. Coyne. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. And motion is approved.
Okay,
Walker.
I'll move on to the West DDA accounts payable. We just had one check issued for $152.50, and that was for half of the MEDA membership dues for 2021, written to the Michigan Economic Developers Association. That was it for the West DDA accounts payable.
I move that we approve the accounts payable for the West DDA.
Support.
Think that, was that a motion, Bars? Mr. Bars? Up, you're on mute, Rick.
That was
You're
Marty.
on- You're on, Rick, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I supported the Mr. Fig's motion.
Okay, motion by Fig, support by Bars to approve the West DDA bills from April 21st through May 18th in the amount of $152.50. Any more questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. And motion is approved.
Okay, and moving on to the East DDA financial reports. We'll start with the revenue and expenditure report for the month ending April 30th, 2021. In the revenue area, you'll notice that the property tax captures are now posted for the year. We have 466,000 and some odd dollars there. So we have our revenues coming in at 89% of budget for the year. And then if you look at the expenditures, we're only at 9% of budget. We do have all of the accounts payable that you approved tonight are posted here, along with everything else from the beginning of the year. So those financials are looking pretty good. And then if you turn to the balance sheet for the East EDA fund, you can see that total assets are about 2.1 million. And the ending fund balance at this point in time is approximately 2.1 million. Are there any questions on the East DDA financials? If not, I'll go ahead and move on to the West DDA. Starting with the income statement for the West DDA for the period ending April 30th, 2021. You'll see again that the property tax captures for the year are posted here. They came in a little over budget, which is good. And so the revenues right now are at 102%. We will do a budget amendment before the end of the year and probably do some adjustments to revenue there. And then if you look at the expenditures for the West DDA, we don't have a lot posted there except operating expenditures. And so we're coming in at about 1% of budget. That's because there's some projects that are in the budget, you know, that haven't been billed yet, haven't been completed. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have some more showing there in the actuals. And then moving on to the balance sheet for the West DDA, you'll see that total assets are about 1.5 million. And if you look at the ending fund balance at this point in time, it's about 1.5 million in the West DDA fund. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on any of those.
Just as a reminder, the road project slated for this fiscal year really is just the Lincoln stretch, right? The Lincoln corner from Broomfield to the bridge. That's that 330,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
And there's also the planned projects for sidewalks in the West DDA also. Filling in some of the gaps on High Street and M20.
And I've seen Roe out there doing a lot of work already.
When does the Lincoln project start?
When does the what project start?
The road
Oh,
on
the last I heard was August, but I haven't heard of anything firm than that yet.
and how long do they think that'll take?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Any more questions on the financial reports? Hearing none, let's let the record show the financials, April financials for the East and the West DDA were presented and filed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And looking at item 7C on the agenda, you have your board expiration dates. And I see we have a vacant seat. Still, how we doing with that? Rodney or Brian?
I can tell you that I think the last board meeting last week was the only meeting I haven't really lifted this up every single time, and that's because we had a full agenda. But we continue, some of the other board members and myself continue to look for others. I encourage all of you to think of those that might want to serve on this board. I can put my cell number. Can I put it in the chatter, Rodney? I put my cell number is on the website. Anyways, it's 989-817-6130. So if you have someone interested, I could help them with the application process and make sure that that gets taken care of. But we don't have anybody yet.
Okay. So moving on to item 8, new business with election of officers. Probably a couple ways we can go about this. Usually start with the chairperson, open that up for nominations, and once that chairperson is seated, then that chairperson then continues on with the rest of the election of the other officials, as well as the balance of the agenda. So with that, who's interested in being chairperson?
I'd like to nominate Tom Keequam for chairman.
I second that.
I'll third that.
Sure about that. I think I got on here when I missed the meeting, actually. 10 years ago.
Well, I think you do a really nice job, Tom. You keep it efficient.
Yeah, you've done a great job, Tom. I think it'd be wonderful to have you at the helm again.
Why you are planning to retire though, Tom?
I appreciate it. So nomination for myself, Tom Keequam, to continue as chairperson. Motion by Fig, support by Hunter. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. And the motion carried.
Thank you, Tom.
Right.
Thank you. So now moving on to, what do we got? I thought we had sub-chair, vice chair, and treasurer and secretary.
We actually, in the bylaws, we only have listed the chair and vice chair. You certainly can add other officers, but that's all that we included in the bylaws for right now.
Who's sub-chair now?
No one.
Ellen? Pardon?
No one. I don't have anybody listed as the vice chair.
I nominate Brian Milkey.
I would second that.
I'm willing to sign up, I guess. Thank you. If there are others.
Anybody else interested in?
I see Rick nodding his head. No.
So we have Brian nominated for vice chairman. We have a motion by Cheryl Hunter, supported by Mr. Sweet. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, the same. And motion's carried. Congratulations, Brian.
Yeah, I count on you being here, Tom.
So I have a question, Rodney.
Yes, sir.
So going back to like the bank resolutions and the signature cards, Have you ever looked at those and whose names are on those?
That is a great question. I will hunt down on that and see. Sherry, Sherry is,
I know the answer to that. James Zalad is on the accounts, along with Kim Rice, the township treasurer, and Mark Stuhldreher, the manager.
So what was Jim's? I thought he was sub chair or treasurer to be on that signature card, but
I think he's considered the treasurer of the EDA. And we usually, after every meeting, we would have him sign the accounts payable checks. But I think since we've gone virtual, Mark's been signing them.
so we're probably good for now, but maybe that's something we want to tackle next time, or when he's here, we probably ought to maybe create that treasurer position to keep him on, keep everything clean.
well, certainly as chair, you could, I think you could be in that role. Ultimately, Mark is responsible for these as township manager in his operational role. So that's why we didn't include a treasurer. It's not a required, not a required officer under the current law. But yeah, if you decide you'd like to do that, we certainly can add it in.
Yeah, let me think about that one, but
yeah. Tom, I guess my thought would be is you and I probably should talk. And maybe you and I and Sherry should talk, and we can look at that issue in more detail.
that sounds good. So let's move on to agenda item 9, pending business. 9A, East and West DDA Districts Development Tax Increment Financing Plan update, please.
So I'll turn the time over to our consultants for this part of the program.
All right, well, I will take it up. Thank you, Rodney. And thanks again, everybody, for being here tonight. Hope you're having a good evening. It's nice and warm down here. So really quick update for the DDA and TIF plans. And I'm going to run through just kind of an overview of where we're at with everything. And then Carmen's actually going to be talking about a couple things, and then he's going to bounce it back over to me to talk about some project concepts. So just to give a quick timing update, both the plans for East and West DDA districts are on track right now. We've been in the process of developing a project implementation list, which contains the plan proposed and some new project concepts for both districts. And it's actually intended to be a supplemental document to the formal plan. It's really intended to be a sort of a living document. It's going to be in the form of a spreadsheet. You'll see it today in PDF format. So you'll see both and can be revised and updated as needed. Those formal DDA plans, they'll contain the definitions of each project category and their associated expense range. And that's what Carmen's going to go through in just a moment. And the TIF tables are currently in process right now. So that's kind of a high level status update about the plans. We did mail some postcards that have a QR code and link to the online survey for business owners within the East and West districts. Those went out, I believe, 2 weeks ago. We're getting some good responses from those. I've seen, just checked, actually, I think it was a week and a half ago that they went out, sorry. But I just checked the East and West results, and we have about 22 responses for West and about 15 or so responses for East. So we're getting some responses trickling in right now. And we're going to give that about another 2 weeks or so and see some of those results and incorporate that feedback into our next draft round. I have a little bit here about the meeting with the county. Now, this was discussed last month, just to kind of give you guys an idea of how we're going to be proactive with the TIF plans. And I have some talking points in the board meeting agenda that you guys can review. If you have some questions about that, we're more than happy to answer those, but I'm not going to necessarily step through those at this time because I'd like to spend the most of our time talking about the DDA projects and opening that up for discussion. And I did include some information for you guys to look through with regard to board expectations and upcoming meetings. You'll see in the list here, today's meeting, we have sort of the project review, like I said, and the next two meetings where we're expecting some feedback will be this review meeting with the EDA board after a couple of other things that come up after today's meeting. So I'll just step through that real quick. Today's meeting is the project review. Then we'll have a review of tax capture and income projections. That's not with this board. It's going to be with some other folks. We're going to be meeting with the county. And then we have this review meeting with the EDA board where we're going to take your feedback, incorporate it, use the survey results, incorporate that as well. And then we'll have a review of the draft plan with the EDA board of directors. So that's going to be a more formal draft. We're getting closer to the final. We hope that that's going to be around July, getting ready for approvals around that time. And then we're going to be meeting with the taxing jurisdictions. We're going to have some development area council, citizens council for both the east and west districts due to the size of the residential areas within those districts. And then finally, the public hearing and presentation. So moving on, I'm going to go ahead and kind of give a quick introduction overview to what we have listed here as our 14 categories for the proposed improvement categories within the formal plan. Again, these are very general and broad. And like I said, the supplemental implementation plan that lists all the projects that follows this information in the board packet will have more specific information, but we like to make sure that we have the comprehensive overview of those types of projects. And I'm going to hand it over to Carmen. And Carmen, if you don't mind, just kind of walking through and letting people know what these categories are, how they're intended to sort of help form and give framework to the plan, and then any questions you guys might have. And then we'll move on to talk about the implementation list.
Sure. Thank you, Elena. Good. I think it's good afternoon still, right? It's late afternoon to all the board members and staff. If you could put up that list, Elena, that would be helpful. Okay. Now, as we've mentioned on numerous occasions, and Elena just alluded to also, these are intended to be broad categories, and we've talked about that before. We want to make sure that we're covering anything that might possibly come up in the coming years within these categories, because the one thing we're looking to avoid is having to amend it again. And as we go through the adoption process for this plan, and it'll especially apply to staff, it's pretty onerous. So that's not something we want to do on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we've got a plan that's flexible, and which is why we're developing this separate strategic action plan, or whatever we end up calling it. And Elena will be going through that after I go through this list of broad categories. So I'll go through them quickly, and then if you have questions after that, I'll be happy to cover it. And once again, this is not the last shot that you're going to have at these categories in the plan. So if you're listening to it and then you go back and you read it some more and you have some questions, you'll have at least a couple of other opportunities to talk through these with us when we come back later with the plan. So the first one is the categories business retention and recruitment. And we've got listed there some things that you could include in there, and it's not limited to that, but it's things like a building rehabilitation grant program, encouraging the development of mixed use developments, supporting programs, which we've already talked about a little bit, for entrepreneurs, that sort of thing. The next one is public buildings and spaces. I know we were talking about a park, for example. It can be a number of things in addition to parks. It can be just open space, it can be gazebos, artwork, anything like that that might be important to you. that you identify in your project specific list. DDA marketing, development studies and promotional events and materials. This is a broad category. If there's a study that you want to have done down the road, it falls under there. If you want to hold a promotional event and help fund it, you can do that. If you want to do marketing for the 2 districts for one reason or another, that falls under this category. So that's what, those are the items that would wrap under this one. If you want to have a building facade and sign improvement program for the commercial areas, they would fall under here too. If you may want to acquire property at some point in time, whether there's a building on it or if it's just vacant property for projects that you want to work on, that falls under this category. If you say, well, we've got this area over near the airport and we'd like to do these things, we'd like to have a special plan developed just for that focuses on certain design things, that would fall under this category. Let's say you acquire a property and there's a building on it and you don't intend to keep that building there. This gives you the opportunity to pay for demolition, or you could work with a private development that you're trying to incentivize, and you could put money into demolition of a building for that too. Now, here's where this isn't going to probably mean a lot to you, but when you put together financing packages for different projects, it does come into play. There's public infrastructure and there's private infrastructure. And it depends on the type of project and what other funding you're looking for, maybe from the state, or if you're using a brownfield program. Certain things will qualify better if they're labeled as public infrastructure and others as private. Okay, so these are in there in 2 different categories to try and make sense out of the financing when we're trying to close a gap on a project funding. Site preparation. You might have a piece of property that you acquired and it's got foundations in it, or there's other things that you need to do it and with it. And this category will allow you to spend money on that to prepare it, whether for construction or even just to seed it and keep it for other development purposes. Number 11, environmental activities. This is something we found with the Meridian Township project. Sometimes you run into sites that the brownfield doesn't pay for everything, and you've still got cleanup costs that you need to take care of to make the project workable and basically compete with a greenfield site. And so that gives you the ability to fund some of those activities above and beyond the brownfield if you need to. Now, here's one of the key things, and we've talked about this in the past. One of the key tools that you're going to have for helping to redevelop projects is it's called project-specific gap funding. And in fact, I had a meeting on a project similar to this today, where costs have gone up for construction, building materials, and so forth, and there's a $500,000 gap in the project. And without this project, you're not going to get new tax revenue from that property. So what you have the ability to do with this is to commit over time a rebating, per se, of tax increment that you're capturing from that new project. Because without that new project, you're not going to have new tax increment there anyway. So you're just agreeing to rebate it back for a certain period of time in order to make the project feasible. Just one thing I'll mention too, whenever you look at projects under this category, you're going to want to bring somebody in who has expertise in reviewing pro forma statements, just to make sure that the profitability in the project is reasonable. It's within certain range, and you don't have the public coming back and saying, oh, you're making this project way too, enticing for development. You're going way beyond what's reasonable, and there's going to be a windfall for the developer. And it just basically helps to keep that whole process honest. The next one is consultation and operational expenses. This gives you the ability to use tax increment financing to hire specialty consultants that you might need. It could be you need an environmental consultant. It could be that you need a marketing consultant, whatever it might be. It gives you the ability to hire those other consultants to help you. And it also gives you the ability to cover some of the operational expenses associated with your boards, with the 2 DDA districts, whatever they might be. I mean, it can be surveys, it can be staff time, it could be, we needed to hire, somebody's, extra police protection for one of our events that we're holding, whatever it might be, that allows you to put them under here. And last but not least, which I know you run into this because you do a number of public infrastructure projects, bond repayments. That's a category that we always want to include in there because especially with some of the work that you've done. So we like to think that with these categories that we've covered pretty much anything that can come up. Okay. We're not perfect. So if you're looking at these as time goes on and you say, I thought of something and I'm not sure how we would fit it under there, feel free to come back to us and let us know that, because it might be that that's something that hadn't been thought about and we would want to include, and maybe it's not covered by a category or it needs to be clarified more. So once again, you're going to have a chance to come back to us with comments on that. Does anybody have any questions at this point in time, if there's anything that doesn't seem clear to you on that?
Yes, I do have a question.
Sure.
Under the first comments that you had, meeting with the county on the consulting team. So on bullet point 5, it says in all proposed expansion districts, there would be a positive effect that would spill over into adjacent areas outside of the districts. Can you explain that to me?
I sure can. It's one of my favorite talking points about project-specific tax increment financing. So when we go to counties and when we go to this county, they're going to say, well, we understand that you want to capture these taxes, but we're going to forego any increase in taxes in that district for this period of time, and we need the money. Okay. So our response is going to be, well, two things. One is if we don't have this money to make projects, to incentivize projects and make them happen, we're not going to get the projects anyway. So it's not really going to benefit you if we don't have those projects. When the tax increment financing ends for that project, you're going to have a windfall of money. But here's something else to think about. So we're putting money into these projects within the district. Our experience shows that when you do that, it has a spillover effect into properties just outside the district. Okay. You've seen that before. Somebody fixes their house up, all of a sudden the people next door fix their house up, and it has a positive impact. The same thing happens with DDAs like this. When you put money into projects, especially the very visible ones, there tends to be new investment just outside the district. So that is not covered by the tax increment financing plan. So they get an increase in new taxes. All the taxing jurisdictions do, including the county, that is not covered by the DDA. So there's other benefits that we'd want to make sure that they're aware of to that. You could have a developer that all of a sudden you make you do something in the district, all of a sudden they make a major expansion to a project that they have, or somebody comes and buys a piece of property and develops it for new housing or new offices or whatever it might be. And that's all new taxes to the taxing jurisdictions. So that's what that means.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Bacon here. I have a very basic question about your survey you sent out. The postcard, I received one. Do you have to do it by a telephone? Because I tried to type in the HTTP address, and it kept telling me that it was already done with.
Okay, so there could be a couple things going on there. It could be that did you complete a survey already?
No, it won't let me. I mean, it's just type the following link into your browser, HTTPS, the //W survey monkey. And it comes up with that this survey's already been done. Now there's a scan for survey, but I don't have a phone to do that. Okay.
Yeah, the link should be working just fine. I'll double check on that.
Double check on that, because I don't believe it is.
Okay.
I believe your link is not valid. I believe you have to do it by phone.
Yeah, there's not a way to do it by phone. So I'll double check that for you guys.
I'm thinking the scan for survey thing,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, when you scan it with your
yes, I think you can get in that way, but I don't believe just typing it into your browser, you can get on it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll
tried
double
a couple
check
times.
That. Yeah,
okay.
I don't know why that's happening. It could be, I don't know if it's something where you have to sort of reload or something once you enter the browser link, but I checked it before and it was working just fine, but I'll make sure to check that again for you guys.
Yeah, I tried twice in 2 different days, and it told me survey was already over with or something along those lines. Anyways,
Okay.
that was I was gonna do it, but I couldn't get on.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Thank you. I'll do that right after this meeting.
I have a brief comment and a question. I know we talked about like demolition in the past as one of these categories, and I can tell you that both in the east and the west, I can see opportunities for that to encourage development. But my question is related to a couple categories where the DDA would be helping invest to allow a project to happen. And I think you lifted that up specifically in the project specific gap funding. Although some of them are kind of related when you look at other issues such as facade and signs where we're encouraging that type of a development. So I'm assuming if the EDA were to go down that road with an entity, a developer, that all gets bonded, right? So that we're in the DDA is ensured that they either get this done or we get our money back, right? Is that?
That's a great question. Okay, my opinion, okay, and this is, I learned this from experience, unfortunately. One of the communities that I've worked with for a long time, they bonded for major infrastructure for a private development. And when the recession hit, the developer went under and the city was stuck without new tax increment to pay for the bonding. So they got stuck with the tab. And they're finally getting to the point where the DDA is able to pay it back. My response to that since the recession has been, don't, for projects like that, private development projects, let the developer borrow the money. They can put this money into their pro forma. So you're going to enter into a development agreement that says, when you pay your taxes each year, we're basically going to rebate this amount of money back to you for a certain period of time to close the gap. Then when this time period is up and we've rebated it back to you, we're all good. So the banks will allow them to include that in their pro forma as a source of income.
You know, you had explained that before and I had forgotten it. So
no, it's, you know what, it's a great question though, because, you know, tax increment financing is tricky. The average, you know, the average resident, you know, does not understand tax increment financing because you don't deal with it all the time. So, you know, it's good to hear that question and give me the opportunity to answer it, because at some point you're going to be asked that question and you'll be able to answer it because you'll remember it.
Yeah,
so
I've heard it twice now. I'll remember it now. Yeah, I know. We coordinated this. Carmine asked me to ask him this.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, I think unless there's other questions, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving through the document here so that you guys can have a better understanding of how we put this together. So there's a couple of different spreadsheets that ended up being PDFs that we're looking at. The first one, I decided to sort of break these up a little bit so we have a little bit more clarity. The first one is this annual projects that covers both the East and West DDA. There aren't any new proposed projects here. These are basically captured from past project review and I think the 2019 and 2020 projects that were listed. So I took those and just have it separated. I have those separated into annual projects for both. And then moving through, I do have a little bit of a legend here. So you'll see some things in green and see some things in blue. Now, what I did is I went ahead and took, again, those projects that we went through for the 2020 project list and earlier 2019 that were pushed to 2020 possibly. They were both proposed projects and potential long-term projects. I recategorized those under those 14 categories that you saw Carmen go through earlier. And you'll see these larger headings in blue with white font. Those indicate those broad project categories. And the blue indicates the background in this cell here. Those blue cells indicate proposed projects or long-term potential projects that were in the original documents provided. So I'm going to go ahead for today's purpose. I'm not going to necessarily spend a lot of time on the blue unless it makes sense to go back to those and discuss those. I'm going to really be spending the majority of the time talking a little bit about and overviewing the green projects that we, Cameron and I came together and are recommending for the future for this DDA plan. And again, this project implementation spreadsheet. And a couple of the things here in the business retention and recruitment for the, again, this is the East EDA. Two of the, actually this business incubator and innovation center flows into a couple of different phases. We broke it up, a business incubation and an innovation center feasibility analysis. So really what we're talking about here is a small business incubator that is the former Mid-Michigan College building at Pickard and Somerton for the purpose of job skill training and that the businesses in the DDA district can utilize to strengthen and grow their workforce. So there's a couple phases, like I said, within that to take that on and create an innovation center. So there's the feasibility analysis phase. The second phase would be application and funding. And then the third phase would be the acquisition and build out phase. And then operations and management. So through those four phases, you can understand that, you know, the first phase being the feasibility analysis, just making sure the project is feasible, really getting through the detail and working through that. Application and funding, acquisition and build, operations and management. We can talk a little bit more about this as we had a discussion with somebody recently who gave us a little bit of insight into how we can go about getting grant funds for this. And we can come back to that, Rodney, I think. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but those are some good projects, I believe, for the DDA within this category of business retention and recruitment. Another one would be a target market analysis. And basically this is a detailed study of the area and of comparable, or I guess you can call them competitive communities, to identify investment opportunities and market gaps for retail and residential markets. So that's an option. Again, that's something that some communities like to do, so they have a really good way to understand what kind of, again, opportunities do not exist in their community that could, based on a lot of data that's taken from the census and also Experian information and some other information for residents of the area and for business owners of the area. Think about commute patterns. A lot of demographics are folded into this target market analysis. And that would provide us with some information to go to developers and say, this has been done by a third party. These are the gaps that exist. And this is where we see you can be successful. So that's one project opportunity in that business retention category. And then just moving through, as you can see, public buildings and spaces. We have already have the parks master plan in there. Another thing would just be general park and recreation improvements for improving public parks and pocket parks within the district. Just having that as a placeholder within that category. And again, these blue categories, you guys have already either proposed or looking at for long-term plans. I did add some information here within this new public landmark or community gathering space, just as a draft to provide some background and context for purpose. Spaces outside the workforce and home are important for building strong communities, you know, shared assets and interests, that type of thing. And looked at Google Earth to look at some potential locations, and they're listed right here, adjacent to McGuire Elementary, and potential expansion areas B, next to the neighborhood, and A. So just some wide swath of potential locations within that. We can probably drill a little bit deeper with those potential locations, but just as just to have that as a bookmark within that space. That's what I was going for. And then the DDA marketing and development studies, promotional events and materials, that category. You had some existing projects here, including branding and marketing activities, wayfinding signage, which are important for the community and DDA districts. Also some potential district advertising, thinking, a little bit later in the game, maybe if that's a medium priority, promoting the businesses through maybe group buying, outdoor advertising, maybe print media, television, radio. So just general advertising for the businesses within the district. And also community events, thinking about, once those public spaces get built out and completed, thinking about some community events that can be hosted in those park spaces, just to sort of build some of that place branding and placemaking sense of community for both districts in the community. And then moving through the building facade and sign improvement program. Again, I'm not going to walk through the blue ones right now, but one that came up, and you're going to see some of these, and I'll identify some of these that came out of our SWOT analysis as well. This was one that came out of the SWOT analysis to explore the acquisition of Enterprise Park for industrial purposes. So doing maybe a feasibility analysis of that at Pickard and Enterprise Drive for industrial use. Again, we talked about that in the SWOT, and I included that here as a DDA property acquisition project. And some of these here, special district and urban design plans, this establish a budget line item for special projects like feasibility studies, design plans, etc. This is not as specific as some earlier projects that you've seen above, but basically just having something within that category so that we can establish that budget line item and have that have special projects like feasibility signs and design plans studies within that category, and providing a cost range estimate within the formal plan. In residential, again, this is demolition here, residential foreclosure, acquisition, and redevelopment. I'm thinking about the expansion area B in the East District, East EDA District. We talked a little bit about that in the SWOT analysis. So potentially acquiring, and if the properties are foreclosed, acquiring and creating some public pocket parks or thoroughfares with sidewalks within that expansion area. So demolition would have to be part of that. Public infrastructure improvements, this is a pretty big category. You'll see some of the repeat from 2019 and 2020 plans within this categorized here. And then new ones would include, this is from the SWOT analysis, improving the roadways in the industrial area near the northwest corner, which is expansion area A. So again, that would be working with the road commission to improve those roadways along North Packard. Same kind of idea here with the intersection of Isabella and Pickard, that I understood during the SWOT that was in need of some improvements. So I included that as a new project for the East DDA. Also, I did make a note during the SWOT, it was stated that this should be opened up to 5 lanes of traffic. I just wanted to gather and capture that information and feedback here, so that if that is something that we should include in our feasibility analysis, then we can make sure that that's captured. Moving through this here, the sidewalk installation improvements along Isabella from Broadway South to Airport Road North. I did see that there was some need for sidewalks within that area, so I included that as a potential project. This also would include or would provide pedestrian access and recreation opportunities between the neighborhoods, schools, and the commercial district. The other here within this category, 2 more, is the sidewalk installation and improvements along Broadway from Rosewood Drive to Somerton Road. Again, another sidewalk installation and improvement potential project for that section. And then the inclusion or development and construction of bicycle lanes where the right-of-way is possible within this district is another concept or project idea to include in this category. Moving through, these here were private infrastructure improvements. Included in this category are a lot of the grant programs that you're going to see, including broadband internet capacity, exterior lighting, pedestrian access, bicycle parking improvements, so on and so forth. And then we also have the site preparation category. This again is I'm sorry, there's a spelling error there, fix that. But this is really just more of a comprehensive definition of this category. It's not necessarily a specific project, but we wanted to include how funding can be used in the site preparation category: removal of foundations, importing a fill, removing of poor soils, so on. Environmental activities, again, this is not necessarily a specific project, but an explanation of what projects would look like. And in this category of project-specific gap funding, we included a couple of projects here, as Carmen sort of was talking about earlier. One of them being the TIF funding, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But first, the identification and analysis of redevelopment sites. If there are some redevelopment opportunities within the district for, with existing structures, to rehabilitate those existing structures and potentially spur additional economic growth and vitality. So the other projects within this category include the application process for TIF funding. So we'd set up an application process for requests to utilize TIF funding for project redevelopment or development. And then, of course, the funding administration of that TIF and the auditing and administration would be a part of this process as well. Again, these non-bolded project descriptions within consultation and operational expenditures, these are really just more of a definition or broader explanation of what projects could look like within this category, as well as the bond repayments. So that's really just a general overview of majority. I was mainly going through the new additions to the project plan. And I think what I'd like to do before I move on here and talk a little bit about the West is I'd like you guys to be able to digest this information, and at our next meeting, come back, and what we can do is kind of walk through some of these, have it more of an interactive, Q&A, or just discuss, these projects and potentially other projects that should be included. And then what I did again is when I separated these out, I do have the current projects listed here. I just wanted to make sure we had a note of these. These again are projects that are budgeted and are currently underway for 2021. This again is the Jameson Park building site, rehabilitation of Pump Station 1. So you'll see this, the current projects broken off for East and West, as well as those annual projects like I showed you earlier. Okay, so moving ahead to the West EDA, just gonna take a quick sip of water. All right. These are the current projects like I showed you earlier, similar to the East EDA. And probably for our purposes, I should have probably put these ahead of the longer list, but this is just how they ended up flowing within the PDF. So my apologies there. But again, these are the West EDA current projects that are underway, started again with the TIF plan and things like that. Also projects that are planned for 2021 in that West EDA district. And the full project list that contains both the proposed projects, long-term potential projects, and new projects, I will go through right now. Again, you'll see some of the, actually, I think what happened was the font was white or it was dark and it didn't show up here. So I'll make sure to fix that when we meet again. But basically, this is the same topic categories: business retention and expansion. So this flows the same way with these blue cells are the proposed and long-term projects that you guys have already captured. And again, the green ones are the new ones. So we can go back. I'm going to just go back a little bit. The second category was the public buildings and spaces. Within this here, the new ones would be just kind of a repeat of what we did with the East, was potentially a updated Parks and Recs master plan for the West as we did in the East. So I put that in there thinking that if we're doing it for the East, we should probably do it for the West. But if there is a need to not do that, or if there is not a need for that at all in that West District, of course, we can take that out. But I thought it's probably best to capture that and have that included rather than leave that out. Another section here, a new project consideration would be the Parks and Rec improvements, again, for the West, just like we did for the East. Marketing, development, studies, and promotional events. You'll see some of the same here that you did in the new projects for the East, district advertising and community events. I talked about that earlier, so I'm going to skip down. Building facade and sign improvement. We basically did not have any new ones for this category for the West at this time. And the same thing goes with the special district and urban design plans category. This is really just a description of this section or a description of this broad category so that we can have something so people can go off of that within this project list, but there will be actual projects here once we identify those. Public infrastructure, moving on. We have Lincoln Road improvements north of River to Remus. So these are some of the things, again, you'll see some of those more specific projects. Some of the feedback that we received during that SWOT analysis was that it's challenging for transportation in the West District. So you'll see some of these projects as proposed, or at least drafted here to help improve that. So one section I was looking at was this section, South Lincoln to Remus Road for road improvements. Another option is to connect the Red Bridge Road and Bradley. I noticed that there isn't a connection at this point, but if it makes sense, that is another way to get into the district over the road. So if you were to have a road extension at that point, connecting those two, connecting Bradley and Red Bridge Road, that would help improve the transportation within that district. The other part of that section, there is an ending of Moss Road. So if kind of in line with the same project above, connecting Red Bridge Road and Bradley, it would also very much improve transportation to extend Moss Road to connect to Red Bridge Road and Bradley Road. So that could potentially be all part of the same project, but I wanted to identify that because it is a separate road that currently does not connect, that could potentially connect to those roads, improving the transportation. And then moving through to private infrastructure improvements, we have the blue ones, the existing projects, proposed projects. At this time, we don't have any of the new ones within this category. Site preparation, environmental activities, you'll see the same content here as you did for the East DDA. Again, more of a description of what those projects could look like. And the same ideas here apply for West and East. So again, identification and analysis of the redevelopment sites for economic growth and vitality within the district, application process for TIF funding, and the funding administration of TIF. And again, within these two categories, consultation and operational expenditures and bond repayments, you'll see again, more of the description within those project spaces that can be, just as bookmarks, so we can move through and think about projects for those further down the line. So I know I went through a lot quickly, and I know there's a lot to digest here, but I wanted to just show you guys where we are at this point, so you can see where our mode of thinking is. And I'm happy to open it up for questions or discussion at this point, but as it is the first time you guys have seen any of this information, we're not expecting immediate feedback, but we just do think it would be good for you guys to take this, digest it, come back with questions, comments, ideas, etc. All right. So that's really it for the projects. Carmen, is there anything that you wanted to add to this or remark on, comment, anything like that?
No, I thought you've done a good job of going through what we've pulled together here. And unless anybody has questions, I think once again, you're going to have the opportunity to take it back with you and review the information. If you have questions down the road, we can answer them, or see any changes that might be needed. You'll have a couple more shots at it. So, I mean, our goal is to make sure that you have ample opportunity to look at these. And obviously our next step is going to be to work with the staff and deal with the proposed expansion areas and meet with the county. Those are the next two steps before we come back to you with the draft plans, because we need to know what they're thinking. So, but I think you're seeing the real, the meat of the work that we're doing right here, which are the project lists and the implementation strategy.
Hey, Tom here. I just got to say, wow, I'm impressed. That's a nice spreadsheet. I can't believe you got all that information from our seemed like short discussions, but you guys must have been doing a lot of research. Oh, thank you. Very impressive.
Thank you. And a lot of this did come, I will say, a fair amount of those projects, like you saw in the blue cells, those are projects that this group did come up with in the past. So there is a lot of information that you guys have already done on your own, a lot of work that's already been done. So kudos to you guys with that. So that's, mainly for our purposes, just to make sure we're not duplicating efforts, but also to make sure that we're categorizing those. So then we can take the next few steps to do that, to go through the process correctly. So right back at you.
And thanks to Rodney for all his efforts too. He's been really good in helping us, manage this information and work our way through the process. So that he's been a huge help on this.
I don't think I had any questions, but I just thought it was overwhelming. What a complete job that you did on it so far. And I didn't realize the different options and opportunities we had through all those 14 points that you made. And I was very impressed. So I'll have to go over those. And I know it's going to keep Rodney busy for a while, but yeah, but thank you guys, really. Thank you for doing all this work.
I think it's a great research and presentation. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just back up what support what Rick and Tom both just said about this list, and it looks phenomenal. So your thoughts are specifics would be at a later meeting, as far as okay.
Yes, we anticipate, once again, it's going to take us a little while we have to work with Rodney and the people in the assessing office and work the expansion into the tax tables and pull the information all together into the draft plan and meet with the county to find out what their thoughts are and which direction we're going in. Because what we don't want to do is come back to you with a plan that says one thing, meet with the county, find out that it's moving in a different direction, and then they have to come back to you again with a different plan. We're trying to be as efficient here with the process as possible so we can stay on track. So when you see this plan again with those tables, it will be a draft that you can start reviewing, and you'll know where we stand with the county and the other taxing jurisdictions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more comments?
What will be the county's role in assessing this plan and giving it a blessing or deciding that maybe they want to make some adjustments to it?
Well, it's the expansion that really, where they really roll into this process. And, we're going to find out from them, are you supportive of the expansion that we're looking at with the East District, or are you not supportive? And if they are not supportive and it looks like something that, is going to be a huge battle, we're going to come back to you and you might say, yeah, we're not willing to take that on. We'll wait until a future time to do the expansion. We'll just stick with the boundaries the way we've got them right now. Or there could be some kind of hybrid deal, or they may be supportive of it and say, yeah, we're all in favor of it. We'd like to, what will happen is they're basically committing to not opt out of the plan. And we need to know that beforehand, because if their intention is to opt out, then we don't have to expand the boundaries, and then they basically lose their ability to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question.
That looks like a really comprehensive look at what we potentially can do, and a lot of details that we can look into and that you've already given us to try and digest. And it looks like a real forward-looking plan that will hold up for a long time.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I think when we set it to, when we interviewed with you for this project, our goal with any of the projects we work on is not just to give you a document, it's to give you a plan that you can work with. And we look towards projects, towards implementation, towards getting things accomplished, because, that's how we're set. That's what we do. That's what we believe in. So the more tools and the more, capabilities and capacities that we help you build, that just makes everybody better off, including the community. So
shows through, it really shows through.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? Well, we really appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, Rodney, what do you have? Any more comments on that?
But just a quick follow-up, as Carmen and Elena said, we will be setting up a meeting with the county shortly. I did have, with regards to Mid-Michigan College and their former location on East Pickard Road near Somerton, I did have a meeting with the college leadership to talk about the idea of an innovation center. We had Carmen and Elena had arranged a meeting earlier with the Michigan representative of the federal EDA, Economic Development Administration, to talk about possible grant opportunities associated with that. My meeting with the college leadership included Jane Fitzpatrick from our regional planning commission, the East Michigan Council of Governments. She has particular expertise in grant writing for these kinds of projects. And so I had a meeting with the college basically to introduce the idea to them, to get kind of a little bit of feedback as to their level of interest. There is some interest. They certainly want something to happen with that building. Their major concern is that they while they can certainly provide in-kind support, they're not really in a position to provide monetary support for this. And there are various local matches involved. So this is where we were talking earlier about gap funding for an innovation center, business incubator type project. This is where the EDA might be able to be helpful in providing some of that local match to make that possible. Certainly the facility is an interesting opportunity there. The college, despite the facility, that building being empty for 6 years, the college has maintained it. I've commented before that you can eat off of their HVAC systems. They are so clean and well maintained. There are certainly some issues with the building just being a bit worn from its prior use as a community college on the interior, but structurally and mechanically, it is in remarkably good shape. So that conversation is ongoing. The college is kind of looking at some of these elements, and there's some additional information being gathered about how some federal grant money might be able to be involved. But I just want to give that quick update. Other than that, I'm looking forward, as you are, to seeing the next step in this. I think this is very exciting, and I think there's some great opportunities for expanding your reach in the East EDA and the West EDA districts through these updated plans.
Very good.
So if you'd like, I do have, we can move on to 10, since that one comes back to me as well, the director comments. Just I wanted to give a very quick update. In the East EDA district, we have several site plan development projects that are in the pipeline. We have one I think we spoke about before on Northway Drive. This is an industrial building that's behind, just south of Home Depot, where we have a distribution center that is coming in. We had to do a rezoning of that property. It was not zoned industrial as it should have been. So now it is, and site plan actually is on the agenda this evening for that project, for some improvements to that site to allow the distribution center to come in. Other projects in the East EDA that are potential, we have two potential retail projects east and west of Isabella Road. To the east of Burger King, to the east of Isabella, we have a retail store project. This was also a recent rezoning. And I've been told that I'm going to be seeing a site plan for something shortly on that. To the west of Isabella, at the southwest corner of Isabella and Pickard, I've also been told that I'm going to be seeing a project for that. Now there on the southwest corner, we have an existing older commercial building that I think would probably fit into our demolition category. It's in pretty rough shape. And then we have several existing houses over there that are also in pretty rough shape. This project proposes to clear those and to put up a new facility there. So those are kind of pending. I haven't seen the applications yet, but they're likely coming in. And then we've also had some conversations with a restaurateur in the region that is looking for a new location and is considering a site on Pickard as well. So some interesting projects. That's all I have for you today.
Cool.
Nice, thank you.